Let's take a look at the protozoa. They also belong to the kingdom of the Protista, so they're single-celled eukaryotes, but they're more the animal-like branch, while the algae were the plant-like branch of the Protista. So now the protozoa, the animal-like branch of the kingdom of the Protista. The profile is shown here. They're unicellular eukaryotes. They inhabit water and soil. They have more animal-like nutrition. That means you wouldn't find them to be green and photosynthesizing. Some of them have rather complex life cycles. They come in two forms typically, as a trophozoite and as a cyst, where the trophozoite is the feeding and growing form, a reproducing form of the protozoa, versus the cyst is more the survival form. It's kind of similar to the spore that a bacteria might form. So the asexual reproduction of protozoa is by fission, budding, or schizogony, multiple fission. There will be the sexual reproduction is by conjugation, right here. And again, the cyst is the survival form. So the trophozoite, the actively reproducing form of the protozoa, and the cyst, a survival form. So here is an image showing conjugation of paramecium. So that would be paramecium tending to sexual reproduction. Here are some characteristics of protozoa. They require typically a large supply of water. Many of them have an outer protective pelicil, requiring specialized structure to take in food. The ciliates, they have cilia that help them to feed. Amoeba, they engulf food particles, so they work like a phagocyte, so that means phagocytize food. So they have these pseudopods that reach out, engulf something, and basically work like a phagocyte. The food is digested in these vacuoles that these protozoa have, and then waste eliminated through an anal pore. Here are some medically important protozoa. First is the group of the excavata. There we have diplomonads, these guys, parabasalids, and euglenas or euglenozoa. Then the group of the amoeba. Definitely some of them can make you sick. Apicomplexa, there you will see malaria in this group. And then ciliates, some of the ciliates can make you sick as well. Here on the first group, the excavata, the diplomonads, they have no mitochondria, but multiple flagella for movement. Parabasalids, they have this undulating membrane, and they do not form cyst stages. And then euglenas, they actually are photoautotrophs or facultative chemotrophs. That means some of them, they have this little eye spot. That's typical of euglenas. Other than that they are kind of green and they do photosynthesize. Some of them are hemoflagellates. They're transmitted by the bites of blood-feeding insects. And here will be some examples of this, the group of the excavata. There you definitely have some protozoa that can make you pretty sick. In the pathogen groups, we definitely have Giardia. Here would be a Giardia cyst, the cyst stage, so the survival form of it. Giardia, they always look like as if they're looking at you. They have these little eye spots right there. It kind of looks like a little creepy little organism right there looking at you. And then Trichomonas vaginalis, we also have that, and I believe in this week's lab, and maybe also in the pathogen group. And then here will be euglena. They're green, as you can see, and they have these eye spots. Many of them have these eye spots. They're red typically. Moving on to the amoebas. Again, they're moving by extending their cell borders, basically engulfing something. And these extensions are called pseudopods. Pseudo is false and pod is foot, so basically false feet that are engulfing something. The one pathogen that you will have in a pathogen group is Entamoeba histolytica, causes amoebic dysentery, the diarrhea type of disease. The other two we do not have in pathogen groups or in the lab. So here will be an amoeba shown as a diagram. You can see these false feet, the pseudopods, false feed sort of cell extensions that are engulfing something. And here, more realistic kind of electron, and actually that's from the light microscope. So Entamoeba histolytica eating up some red blood cells, and it's already eaten a bunch of them. Moving on to the apicomplexa. They cannot move, they have no mode of movement, and that makes them obligate intracellular parasites. So they all have to live inside of other cells. They have complex life cycles. That's how the name came about. I think the apicomplexa with the complex life cycle is kind of easy to remember. There we have some important pathogens. First up here, Toxoplasma gondii. That's the cause of toxoplasmosis. It's transmitted by cats, and the problem is that during pregnancy it can cause fetal infections. It's not really causing much of a problem to adults or even children, but during fetal development it can cause problems. Cryptosporidium, that one we also have in a pathogen group. It's transmitted via feces that's basically rubbed into the ground. Let's say a bird poops in the ground, and then it gets all mixed in with the dust on the ground, and then you might end up inhaling some of that, and that could cause the problem. This one also can cause waterborne illnesses. Here would be the sporozoite of an apicomplexa in this image. And then here, moving on with more apicomplexa that can make you sick. Of course, the big one, Plasmodium, the cause of malaria. That's definitely something you need to know. We have that in the lab for this week, and also in a pathogen group. The Plasmodium protozoa is transmitted to the Anopheles fly, the Anopheles mosquito, and that's the part of the life cycle where it actually sexually reproduces in the Anopheles mosquito. And then once the Anopheles mosquito bites you, then it will inject the sporozoite into your body, and then that sporozoite undergoes schizogony in the liver, and that produces merozoites. And the merozoites, they infect the red blood cells and then form this ring stage inside of the red blood cells. And then eventually the red blood cells, they're so filled up with more of the Plasmodium protozoa that the cells will rupture, and then the merozoites, they infect new red blood cells. Typically, you have these cyclic releases of the Plasmodium, and that causes these cycles of fever and chills and feeling terrible. Once all the merozoites have found a new red blood cell, they hide inside there, reproduce some more, and meanwhile you're feeling great. But then once they burst out, they all burst out together. You feel again awful. And here's the life cycle of Plasmodium vivax, the cause of malaria. So let's start out here with an infected mosquito biting a human. The sporozoites will be coming from the mosquito. They go into your bloodstream, and they will go into the liver, and there they undergo schizogony. Once they are released into the bloodstream from the liver, then they can infect red blood cells, and in the red blood cells they form this ring stage, and then they will start reproducing and growing, dividing, reproducing merozoites. Once the red blood cells are filled up with these merozoites, these red blood cells will burst, and the problem really is that they all burst together. Somehow they have this coordination there going on. And then it can go two ways. These merozoites, they can find another red blood cell and multiply there and just continue on that cycle. Or if another mosquito bites you, then they will pick up some of these merozoites, and then in the mosquito's digestive tract, they will do their sexual reproduction in this case. And then once they've done that, then these sporozoites, they can then infect another human once this mosquito bites another human. And of course, malaria has caused many millions of deaths worldwide, mostly in Africa and also in South America. We will also talk about Plasmodium vivax and malaria, of course, in our pathogen groups. Now here, let's move on to the ciliates. They move by cilia. Basically, these protozoa, they're completely covered with cilia. Picture paramecium is usually a good example. There's one human pathogen, and that would be Balantidium coli. That one causes a diarrhea type of disease. And here would be a typical picture diagram, and then also a light microscope picture of a ciliate. And you can see the cilia all over the body of this ciliate protozoa right here, all over. What you can also see sort of this food gullet, and then the typical kind of organelles that would be found in a cell. So here we have a contractile vacuole actually that's used to expel water that came in excess. And then down here, vorticella. Now, moving on to slime molds. It could hardly be more disgusting. Slime and molds sounds both pretty bad, but here they are. We have cellular slime molds. They kind of resemble amoeba. They ingest fungi and bacteria by phagocytosis, so same mechanism as an amoeba would use by engulfing something. The cells aggregate to form stalks and the spore caps that then differentiate into spores. So let's take a look at this. And here will be the generalized life cycle of a slime mold. I have no intention on spending time on the life cycle of a cellular slime mold. So you're welcome to look at it if you're interested, but I will not ask you questions about this, promise. Okay, so here some more information about plasmodial slime molds. Basically, it's a mass of protoplasm with multiple nuclei, moves like a giant amoeba, and they do have cytoplasmic streaming. So that means the protoplasm moves and changes speed and direction to distribute oxygen and nutrients within the cell. And again here, the life cycle of a plasmodial slime mold. I just find slime molds not very interesting or appealing enough to study their life cycle, whether sexual or asexual reproduction. But you're welcome, of course, to study it if you like, but I don't find them very interesting, neither are they important for us. Now, moving on to worms, the helminths. So, of course, worm infections are actually a big problem worldwide, not so much in the United States, but worldwide, yes, they are a problem. There are definitely a bunch of parasitic worms. Not only do they infect humans, but also animals, your pets. You might know about that. Cats and dogs frequently have worms, humans actually too, and worldwide it is really still a very big problem, parasitic worms. There are two phyla that are where the parasitic worms are in. There will be the flatworms, the Platyhelminths, and then the roundworms, those are the nematodes. So let's take a look at the generalized characteristics of helminths. So they're multicellular eukaryotic animals, so they're in the animal kingdom. They are specialized to live in hosts, so they are parasites. They may lack their own digestive system. They have sort of a very simplified nervous system. They have reduced or lack a way of movement or locomotion, and they have fairly complex reproductive systems, actually very powerful reproductive systems. Their life cycle is they're dioecious. That means they have separate male and female animals. Other worms are monoecious. That means the male and female reproductive system is in one animal, the same animal. That would classify them as hermaphroditic. In general, eggs, out of the eggs will hatch larvae, and out of the larvae you have the adult new worm. Let's take a look at Platyhelminths, those are flatworms. First up, the trematodes, or flukes. They're flat, leaf-shaped, have ventral and oral suckers. absorb food through a cuticle covering. And relevant here for us would be the Paragonymous species. Those are lung flukes. And then we have the schistosoma. That will be blood flukes. More to come.